And without further ado, I would like to call Professor Magda Lagudas to stage to lead our next session. And Magda will invite our speakers as we talk to the concept for this next session is maybe to go more into advanced research, right? And to see how the issues related to innovation, translation are reflected in that domain. So Magda, the floor is yours.
It's after 12, so I guess we can say maybe Kalopojevma. First of all, thank you to the organizers for a wonderful event here. I'm Magda Lagudas from Texas A&M University, and I have a great honor to be moderator for this panel. I would like to invite our panelists. So Dr. Ashby, Director from the Pacific Northwest National Labs. For those who are not aware, in the US we have, last time I checked, about 17 national labs. So PNNL, we will hear about them, but I was impressed when I heard about the 200 plus inventions, disclosures of invention that happen every year. Of course, for those who have been with us for the last couple of years, you have heard about Dr. Hamaguchi. What can I say? 2 billion in your hands and deliver in 100 days, right?
Yes.
Be able to detect new pathogens, be able to identify treatments, and no small task, come up with a new vaccine. Then I would like to invite Dr. Metson, all the way from New Zealand. Dr. Metson is Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research. I know his area is some version of alumina, I'm not exactly sure, but I think industrial alumina, that's what he called it?
Yes.
Yes, and he has served in different capacities. And of course, we would like to invite two local faculty here. So Dr. Katerchidis, who is a co-founder of Neuron Energy, and I was totally confused yesterday, but I did my homework last night, and I did figure out what you guys are doing. And also Dr. Chipuras or Chipuras? Chipuras, okay. So a little bit of context for the last two presenters. For Dr. Katerchidis, I think the best I got out of your website is you're doing some kind of a monitoring of and management of photovoltaic installations. And yes, we have plenty of those, and I think that you probably will educate us on that. And for Dr. Chipuras, he's an associate professor in the University of Western Macedonia, and your research has some bio, some informatics, and combination of those. Exactly. So no small task on what Roberto said. We are talking about deep transformation research and how we take it into applying it somewhere and making an impact by solving some big, grand challenges. But I think, Alberto, I would say, we also want to make it exciting. We also want to make it controversial, right? So since this is the last channel, we would like to have a little bit of excitement. So the questions that the group put together is, we already just heard about what's happening with industry. How do we promote engagement of industry? I know in the US we use different mechanisms. We talk about index of engagement for industry, how we take them from small engagement to large. But the question is, what else is needed to engage industry into the things that you're doing? And I was going to start with Dr. Ashby. Would you like to show the video now or later? Or
well, I have some remarks
okay,
first, and the video
please
will come into that if I may.
Okay, please.
So, well, good afternoon now, and thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I do want to thank the GFCC and the Council for the invitation. So thank you, Roberto, and others on the team for this. And I am the director of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, one of 17 national laboratories in the United States. And collectively, we do form the nation's most comprehensive research complex. And together we work to address some of the countries, and in fact, the world's, you need me closer? Okay. The world's biggest energy, environmental, and security challenges. And we do that through advancing scientific discovery and transformative technological solutions. And we are driven to get solutions in the hand of industry, where innovation can best benefit our neighbors, our nation, and the planet. Now, we've talked a lot about how we do these things. We'll come back to that in the questions. But in my opening remarks, what I want to do is tell you what we're trying to do. let's get some excitement of what are we harnessing all these activities towards. And so here I'd like to talk about some of the things, and if you looked at the preamble, it talked about moonshots. Everybody uses that analogy, and it's dated by 50 years, until this week. And so as you may have seen earlier, we celebrated the historic moonshot with the successful launch of Artemis 1, which will represent our return to the moon, and from there as a stepping stone to Mars, which really represent quite a moon and Mars shot for the human race. Now, closer to home, the Department of Energy, for whom I work, has looked at things called energy earth shots, because we recognize the climate crisis calls for innovation as well. And it's not just innovation in academia or the labs, it is with industry. And our Secretary of Energy is extremely focused on not just doing the research, but demonstrating and deploying the technologies. And so what are some of these barriers to more quickly delivering more abundant, affordable, and reliable clean energy solutions? There's a host of earth shots being defined. Let me tell you some of the outcomes that we're working towards. Reducing the cost of clean hydrogen by 80%, capturing and durably storing carbon for less than $100 per net metric ton, creating enhanced geothermal systems that are 90% cheaper, again getting it to $45 per megawatt hour, leveraging industrial heat, which is often treated as a waste product, by reducing associated greenhouse gas emissions by 85%, driving down the cost of floating offshore wind to $45 per megawatt hour, and revolutionizing energy storage, in particular grid-scale storage, so it's 90% cheaper and delivers at least 10, perhaps close to 100 hours anytime, anywhere. And so these are some of the energy earth shots that were in fact debuted and discussed at this week's COP conference in Egypt, where I was earlier. And so I'd like to share a brief video that talks about one of these earth shots and gives you an idea of why it's important, who we're collaborating with, and toward what end. So if you clue up that video, it's describing the Grid Storage Launch Pad, which will be a national collaboration facility for academia, national laboratories, and industry. So if you cue that up, please.
Energy storage is the bridge between affordable, carbon-free, renewable energy and a modern, resilient power grid. But to use all the renewable power we can produce, grid batteries have to last longer and cost less. At Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, we're developing better energy storage systems for the grid, like next-generation flow batteries with unique electrolyte chemistries that hold more energy. We tweak this organic molecule used in candles as a sustainable, lower-cost alternative to the chemical commonly used, resulting in a battery with twice the energy density. Using artificial intelligence, we screen 24/7 for the right materials from among hundreds of millions of possibilities. Collaborators worldwide can tackle challenges at DOE's new Grid Storage Launchpad. Teams can visualize and validate new storage technologies. Prototype batteries are designed and undergo testing in realistic grid conditions, and standards are developed for widespread deployment. Together, we're innovating faster today for a clean, secure, and equitable energy future.
So this is just one example of the earth shots that the Department of Energy is launching. And the goal here is to reach our goal of reducing carbon emissions in the United States by 50% by the end of the decade, to produce 100% clean energy by 2035, and hit net zero carbon emissions by 2050. These are bold ambitions that we're seeking, and that's the kind of outcome that we want to achieve as a species on this planet. It's going to take collaboration and innovation. And so no one institution or nation can do this alone, which I think gets to some of the questions we'll be answering a little bit later. So I'm confident by working together we can do this, and so I want to thank you for this opportunity to share some of the things that we need to harness the intellectual power across the planet to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hasby. Dr. Hamaguchi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for offering me time to discuss a few things. Until this March, I was the president of GIS, the Japan Science Technology Agency. generally speaking, we handle $1 to $2 billion per year for funding. I could success to double the funding. There are several secrets. I don't talk this much, but anyway, among many projects we handled, one project we call it COI, Center of Innovation, is somehow moderately successful one. I guess your society may have a difficulty in collaboration, accelerate the collaboration between company and academia. We have similar problems, still we have. Partly because the reason is our society is a very strict silo society. Academia doesn't know anything about real world. Real world doesn't know real science. This is a critical issue we already suffering from. And 10 years ago, we started COI to accelerate collaboration between companies and universities. We requested universities for the project. And among many apply, we selected 18 universities. To these 18 universities, we set up the Center for Innovation. And total cost, we spent around $500 million for 10 years. So not too much. For each center, we offered roughly estimate $5 million per year to $3 million. Very small. But we request these universities equal partnership with companies. And when we started, the company joined this project very small. But afterward, last year we found more than 300 companies joined this project, rapidly increased. And we are succeeded to establish a so-called venture business company as around 35 companies we started, and these are very healthy, organized. And we made a patent, roughly estimate 1,500 patent we made during these 10 years. Also, we published paper, more than 2,000 papers. And very interestingly, collaboration between science and the real world is also activated. For example, we applied brain science to fun-to-drive mechanisms of the Mazda Motor Company. This is a typical approach, somehow imaginable, dreaming, but close to the reality. We are thinking about these themes. We spent a long time to establish the theme. Now we have 3 pillars of point. First one is backcast research. At the time, 10 years ago, we set up the time point 10 years later, what kind of technique or science or product we may need. We discussed several months. Each sentence discussed and set up the theme. And for this theme, we established a system, and we request people to join who has special techniques. This is one point. Another important point at the start point we discussed is mission-oriented. We should have some mission that easily understandable from ordinary people. Otherwise, our project is basically supported by the tax. So we need to explain the importance, and we need to show the importance to the citizens. So mission is very important keyword, and we discussed them. And there are many missions made by each centers, but point is well-being for the ordinary people. How do we make it possible by the technology and science is very important. And third point I would like to emphasize, because of gap between academy and industry, sometimes we use same word, but meaning is completely different. For example, in case of university, long-term research means 10 years or sometimes 20 years, don't you think so? But for the company, it's just 1 year or 3 years. So we say long-term research meaning completely different. So correct these subtle difference we have based on the culture we grown up as a researcher or as a company head, completely different. To correct these difference, we need under one roof research. Under one roof means we offer the building for each site, and each site company member and academia member join together for the everyday discussion. We spend long discussion, especially at the start point. This was helped us a lot. After all, we think we moderately succeeded, and we asked the outside company to check the effect of our activity. And compared with the spent funding money, we got the answer from the company, almost 20 times higher social effect. This is very important point. That means we offer job to the local people, and we can offer cash flow in the local people. And these things, I think, should based on partly the local culture, local identity. This is important to make the dream to be real things. I think so. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Ashford. Oh, Dr. Metzen. Yes.
Thank you. This is a complex area because when we start talking about moonshot projects, that is invariably anchored with public funding.
Yeah.
They are the only people who can take the level of risk that's involved. And when we seek to get industry engaged in that, that really you need to be quite well advanced, and you need to actually have very well defined what your moonshot is going to be. Because I would look at an example, we have a parallel project in New Zealand around RNA technology to build a platform of capability in that area. Now, the goal is reasonably well defined in that case. If we then break it down and say, well, what will this platform support? It will support a range of platforms, and immediately people want to turn it into a moonshot. And if you leave that with a group of academics, what we invariably do is find a way of funding what we're already doing. The moonshot becomes our own personal thing. So focusing and being rigidly focused, sharply focused on the goal is very important. And then how do you engage with industry? So the RNA technologies is another good example, I think, where part of the issue in New Zealand is our own, we realise our own internal reliance on our own capabilities if our borders close. And now that requires things like a manufacturing capability at the end of the line, which is something universities and public agencies don't get into, but we need to seed that activity somewhere in the system. We need to build the relationship with the industry partners who can enable that part of the technology. How do you build those relationships? And I love the comments about co-location and people who bounce off each other every day, because you need to build a lot of trust. That's how you de-risk, my own view, that's how you de-risk those relationships. The big difference, of course, is that we have $47 million, not $2 billion to spend. So.
Thank you. So Nikolaos, Dr. Karterchidis.
Yes, I started as a researcher in UK at Imperial College, and the last few years I'm an entrepreneur with two companies here in the Science and Technology Park, one in energy management and monitoring, and especially photovoltaic parks, and the other one in biomedical engineering. So having experience from both sides, the academia and industry, I would like to mention a few key points in order to foster a collaboration. The first things, especially here in Greece, is about the open mind and the willingness to cooperate. There was a barrier between industry and academia. The second one is the lack of information. A lot of times we don't know what is being developed or researched in the universities, and in order to signify that, I will say an example from my old university, Imperial College. There is an office, the Imperial Innovation, which there is a website, and also people there in order, someone from the industry to go and say that we need an algorithm and an output, a result of this research and this project that can be incorporated in our projects. So sorry about that.
Industry calling.
We just want to make sure that your numbers, the people you hired, they were included in the numbers we heard earlier on.
Yes. So the first thing is the lack of information, and the final most important as an entrepreneur and heading two companies is the real size that said about the colleagues. I will say that as a return of investment. For every £1, dollar or euro that I'm willing to spend as a company in a research project, in some new development, I have to be certified that this will return back to me in a proportional way. So there is any point to do research for the research and just fund another paper or something that is not, let's say, at least connected to some of my industrial needs or the community here in Ioanna, and not only Ioanna and Greece, but in a worldwide level. Always my strategy and plan for the companies and the project that we are willing to participate is for a global reach, not only for the Greek market or the European market.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Tsipouras.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation.
Hopefully when you're looking for the moonshot projects, you're not looking for your own lab. You're looking for bigger.
Yeah, hopefully. But
right?
In any case, although I'm here as a representative from academia, I also I'm a little bit of both, because I also own some spin-off companies and we have tried several things. So I'm pretty much aware of both things, both the part from the academia where you have this task in order to ensure some funding for the research and to do some cutting-edge research, and try to cope with much bigger universities and much bigger research companies, that they have more funds and more people to do that. But also from the part of the spin-off companies and the small companies that grow inside the universities, where you have to try to reach bigger audiences and try to bring this research to the market, because this discussion is all about for this discussion is how to try to move the technology projects and the research that is done in the lab and try to get it out. And as my colleague earlier said, all of them, I think, pretty much mentioned that this bridging is the most important thing of how to have people with know-how, how to do this bridging, how to move all these great ideas and research from the lab and go outside, and of course have the funding and the tools to do so. And if I see correctly, most of the questions that we have to answer later is based, are focusing on exactly this part, because this is the major problem, I think, in everywhere, to have the right people and the right tools in order to take out this research from the laboratory and move it out to the market, to the industry, or whatever it can be applied in the real world. So pretty much this is all I have to say. I don't want to spend more time. Okay. Let's move with the conversation. And I think the most important part of this is this conversation. So
I totally agree. I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. I think you mentioned Artemis, and I'm tempted to say something about it, because we went I spent about 10 years working on payloads for NASA. One of them made it to space, and we went to the first attempt for the launch. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, so we were happy to hear that it made it. And then in what Dr. Hamaguchi said about the faculty, so we work with the I-Corps program of NSF, and sometimes we find it quite interesting to work with graduate students, in particular, who have spent 4 or 5 years doing research in the lab, and tell them, you condense this so that the person on the street can understand what you are doing. It doesn't matter if it's nanotechnology and gold-plated. It's like, how is it making me healthier? How are you going to be able to detect what I have much sooner? So those great comments. So I think the next question they wanted us to address is, okay, we are all identifying ways to engage research for high tech, and now the question is, how do we translate this faster into a commercial product? What kind of things are needed in order for us to do faster? So I will mention some of the things that Deborah mentioned about NSF has the I-Corps. So I'm fortunate to be part of the I-Corps hub, one of the latest that have been given. And the focus is, how do we go into the faculty and give them incentives to go out and do the market analysis? And if I talk, since I'm an engineer, if I talk about engineering faculty, the last thing they want to hear is about the value proposition, right? But this is what is needed to happen. And that's where I see a great way for us to have the industry, because they are required as industry mentors, and they are bringing that additional input. So how do we accelerate the movement of translation research, deep tech research, into the market to impact the lives of people? Yes.
Okay, so the reason I led with some of the examples is I think the first thing you need to do is get people excited and rallying around a shared outcome, whether it's going back to the moon, creating a drug to save lives, or things to save the planet. And I can tell you, young people are excited about all these things, right? So that's the first thing you have to do, because once you're excited about a shared goal, you're willing to work hard to achieve it as quickly as possible. Now, once you've done that, I think you have to then recognize what are the different roles people have to play in this. Academia is motivated differently than, say, the national labs or than industry. Recognizing how each can contribute and aligning their motives, whether it's to make a profit for shareholders out of industry or to advance fundamental research out of academia, aligning those interests is key to accelerating progress. I think one thing that's often overlooked, however, is what does it take to get something into the marketplace? It's not just enough to connect with industry and say, hey, we've got an idea for a product, all right? You also have to make sure the market's ready. And in some of these cases, you're talking about things where the market is regulated. And that means making sure you've also set the stage for the market to be ready to accept these products. What are examples of that? We're doing work in new manufacturing technologies that could be used in airplanes, all right, to make them lighter. Those are heavily regulated. If you're looking in the life sciences, heavily regulated. And so what are you doing to make sure that you're setting the stage that if you've got a great product, you're not going to have the FAA or the FDA or some other regulatory agency say, time out, we've got 10 years of testing we've got to do. So you've got to align everybody, and I think it's understanding what motivates different people and what you need to do actually see that pathway through to successful market deployment. And I think it all starts with getting people excited about a shared outcome so they'll have their tenacity to overcome the inevitable hurdles that we'll face along the way.
Let me say something about innovation. For me, there are two types of innovation based on science and technology. One is curiosity-driven one, based on super great scientist has inspiration and try it many years and finally reach the goal. This is type, for example, if you have this iPad, blue LED, Akazaki and Amano invented, takes 40 years. But it completely changed our world. Otherwise, we still use brown tube for the TV. We don't have iPad, surely. This is one type. Another type is mission-oriented. This can be made with a group of people of different sectors. It's not only made by the scientists, but we need supporters. We call it research administrator or something. If we want to go straight the road, we need to clean up it. The people who clean up the road is also very important for the innovation. So mission-oriented and curiosity-driven. For the academia, both one is important. We shouldn't reject either of them. Both are effective sometimes. But now our society is rapidly changing. So mission-oriented is a relatively easy way to accelerate innovation. But for this type of innovation, we need supervisor, good manager, and outside advisor. We need a kind of criticism to correct the road. These are what I'm thinking about it. And I have been concentrated on mission-oriented type, but I love myself a curiosity-driven. Sorry.
Okay. All right, thank you. That was perfect.
But the balance between those two is really critical, I think, in a healthy research ecosystem. People in the audience may be familiar with the Welcome Leap programs, because they are based very much around the DARPA model from the US, which is very much at the sharp end of mission oriented, which is go very fast, break a lot of things along the way, get the best people irrespective of country things, get them working on a common goal with a common focus, and be prepared to be ruthless in terms of the things that work and the things you stop in those schemes. And that has been actually quite, I think, remarkably successful in that mission-oriented, speed-to-market type approach. But it needs to sit, how do you develop those really high capability people that service a Welcome Leap program? Actually, they're the people who have been doing basic research in an area for many years. That's why that balance is important.
Great point, great point. Nikolai.
Yes, speaking by example, I would like to tell you a little bit about the story of our commercial product, SolarEye platform. It's a cloud-based artificial intelligence platform for the automatic monitoring and management of photovoltaic installations all over the world. So from the point of starting the company, we had a big background in artificial intelligence and knowledge expert systems that we wanted to apply to a commercial application. So this was the first initiative. Then we grabbed the market opportunity of the explosion of Greek energy, not only in Greece, but all over Europe. So we saw a potential for great development and, let's say, a lucrative market. A lot of money were spent in this field, and people there were willing to invest on new ideas and opportunity. Then we tried to grab the knowledge of the industry on this field, and we went to the first exhibitions about photovoltaic industry, like Intersolar in Munich. So we developed our product and application in direct cooperation from the very beginning with colleagues and market leaders in energy and especially photovoltaic energy directly from the beginning. So we try to grasp their knowledge and also their needs. And then we was ready to change our research and applied knowledge based on their remarks. For example, one of the key elements that us as researchers was, at least our idea, the selling point was the artificial intelligence system, the virtual engineer, the automatic of everything, and the transparent monitoring of the PV system. But when we went in our first exhibitions, no, this was not the selling point. The selling point was the hardware agnostic of the platform, the cloud-based and the automatic updates and independent of the installation that would be applied in every photovoltaic installation all over the world. So our idea as research was totally different about the selling point and feature of the platform regarding to the market. And then we were ready to adapt and reduce our development cycle from 1 year or 3 years to 3 months and 6 months for the major updates, because we tried to compensate for the industry that there are changing needs. A lot of different needs arise, and the, let's say, timing of a researcher is much different than a commercial product in the industry. And so this gave us an idea in order to adapt, change our perspective and fields, and now after 5 years we have more than 1,000 installation monitoring all over the world, from small residential installation of 5 kilowatts to big plants of 10 megawatts in all over the world.
Great point. So innovation is happening at such a fast pace that the needs of the market keep changing. So we need to be adaptable as people who develop the next set of innovations. Marcos, Dr. Chipura.
Yes. Also, I would like to point something out related to an example, pretty much, but not from the energy part, but from biomedical engineering, because again, as I said before, it's about knowing what the obstacles are in the road to the market, and most of all, knowing how you will find people to tell you how you overcome them. That's the most difficult part. For example, in some kind of device that we have developed for monitoring patients, there were several obstacles that nobody in the research was aware that we were going to find out in the process. And for intellectual property, for example, which is a major discussion here in the same room about 4 or 5 years before, with an event that it was organized from the Greek Intellectual Property Organization. And we're having pretty much the same discussion, how we're going to do this, who is going to help us, because we have the research, we have the results, we know exactly what is the innovation and what exactly are the things that we need to do, but what are the claims? What exactly are the claims that we're going to put inside an application for intellectual property? How we're going to find out if they're original or not? And how are these are going to be written down in order to be appealing for, in order to do that? Of course, now after 5 years, having both earned 2 patents, one national and one international, maybe it's more easily in our minds, but at that point, even finding someone to address these questions, not from the official part, not from the intellectual property organization, but in the market, people that they have done this road and they know exactly where to be more careful, it was very difficult. We had to find a guy that knew a guy that knew a guy, and then try to follow up this lead in order to find someone who had actually done this and knew exactly where we had to focus. And of course, after that, more problems about regulating markets, for example, because this is a biomedical prototype. In order to do some pilots with real patients in multi-sites and multi-centers, we had to undergo a lot of regulated areas, and most of these were not, nobody knew exactly what to do with these. They maybe had a vaguer idea how to overcome these issues, but at some point we had to state a question in the Greek lawyer authority, legal authority, exactly, and they never answered because they didn't know what exactly to tell us. They didn't know what exactly was the policy, both Greek and European, in data, in cloud-based data for medical devices. They didn't know that. Nobody. We haven't come with an answer to that even up until now. But we found someone to tell us how to override this and move to the product. So all of these things, all of this know-how and all of these barriers that you have to overcome, most of these you don't actually know from the beginning. You're just moving the pace and try to overcome as much as you can in this area.
Great point. I wanted to pick up a little bit about the intellectual property. So Texas A&M, it's a large school. It has 75,000 students, but large engineering school, 25,000. We've been there for 30 years. We never talked about to engineering students about entrepreneurship, intellectual property, entrepreneurship, but now that is required. That is required. So now we educate our students. What does it mean when we talk about IP? What do we talk about trademarks? What do those terms mean? And how do you protect the things that you work? Industry comes in even for, not only for sponsored research, but even for like capstone projects. We have to negotiate the IP. And as you mentioned, it goes through the different legal offices. So now we are going into a place where we say, Sandia, we would like to do a master agreement with you. So we negotiate it only once. And then every department who wants to play, they can play. Then we just do a task order along with that. So you raised a good point that resonated for me because we all deal in that area. Last questions, and I think we have about 10 minutes, if you give us 10 minutes. So the last point, the last question they had, what kind of, we already talked about those, but what type of frameworks are needed? Is there anything we didn't mention so far? So anybody, everybody, however you would like to address it. It seems to me we talked about industry, we talked about moving this into the market. So what else on a framework? I think for industry, we talk about industry consortiums. We talk about master agreements for research. We talk about how do we establish in our own ecosystems, places where industry comes in and collaborates with us day in and out. Now we didn't have professor of practice 10 years ago. Now we have 100 in our college only. People who have extensive experience. So what else is there that can help us take deep research into the market that we haven't touched?
Well, I was going back to one of the earlier sessions and picking up on the point you just made, I think that for the efforts within Greece, it was, I think, one of the more interesting and hotly contested debates was about how do you set up the commercialization within the university. And so I think one of the frameworks there, in the United States, it is quite well established in terms of having commercialization offices at each university. At our laboratory, we have that helps navigate. And so I think one of the frameworks that's set up is your commercialization concierge, someone who knows how to navigate those issues in the market you're trying to play. It's very different if you're taking a technology and moving it into a biomedical environment than, say, in an environmental. You have to understand that. So I think one of the frameworks to set up, and I don't think you need a lot of government permission, I don't know the culture here, but just saying, all right, we want to hire somebody who's going to help our people navigate this bureaucracy of figuring out, all right, what do you do? And I think another part of the framework, incentivize people to protect their intellectual property. Academics are so used to just publishing, and there's plenty to publish. What we've done is we've said, look, if you're going to publish in there, that's great, but let's first protect your intellectual property. And oh, by the way, before we fund a research effort, we look at where it's most likely to generate valuable intellectual property, because researchers want to work on this. They always have to narrow down their proposal effort. Why don't you narrow on something that's going to yield valuable intellectual property? So having the framework to evaluate what is the most fruitful areas of research that would lead to intellectual property, and having commercialization offices that can help the researchers navigate this through, I think, are two essential elements of a framework for successful transfer. Oh, I just generated.
Yes.
A lot of hands.
An example. In 1995, some researchers, fantastic researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory. I was on the Industrial Advisory Board that I started there with former Director Sig Hecker. They were going to a big conference on high-temperature superconductors. And the laboratory asked the researchers to look at their papers. And of course, they should have filed patent disclosure. And they, of course, didn't want to do it. The laboratory director had to step in, stop the paper. It was a huge brouhaha. After that, we worked at Los Alamos. They created an entire patent portfolio around high-temperature superconductivity and the materials. Anybody in the world now that wants to work in that field that has commercial potential, they have to come to Los Alamos and deal with those patents. That's why this is so significant. Somebody in a new tech transfer office at University of Yanina needs to see what areas and create a patent portfolio to commercialize. And of course, you do that in Japan, and you do it at P&L, and you do it at your university. And this is now 25, 30 years old. So this part of Greece and all of Greece has to do this. It's a really urgent thing. Sorry for being so passionate.
No, that's
I just
okay.
want to respond real
Thank
quick
you.
before the gentleman. This is really important. So we at our laboratory, Battelle manages the lab for the department. We mandate that, so we have management top down, but we do more than that. We incentivize employees. They want to own it because they can make money off their intellectual property. Okay? So it's really important to have both.
I want to be passionate too, like Deborah, but I'm sorry that I will bring problems. Let me tell you one basic thing. But no, let me tell you one. Let me explain to you something.
That's okay.
According to the American regulations, you can go out, publicize your invention, and you have 1 year time to patent. You know what's the European law? Do you know the European law? According to the European patent laws, you are not allowed to publicize your invention before you have patented it. So the Europeans have first to find the patenting without disclosing the information, and then, you know how difficult that is? In the States, you go around for a year, you try to find the companies, and you find. So the rest of the world is not like the States. It has differences. And these differences have obstacles. This is a major obstacle that happens in Europe. Let me explain that to you again. You're a professor, you have something, you don't go out talk about it. You're not allowed to. If you go and present something, you have lost the patent rights, period. This
So
is the European
hopefully,
patent.
so-
You have the EU commissioners. Greece is very powerful in the EU Commission. Get that changed. Those laws do not exist in the UK.
I agree with you. Change the law. That's the easy part.
Would you like? Okay, so thank you. So hopefully we raise the point with enough passion here. So we know there is a lot of innovation that is happening because we know that you are very successful. So I'm assuming you have been able to patent the work that you have done and launch the companies you have done. So maybe there is something addition that has to happen to make it even easier. Yes, Dr. Hamaguchi.
Patent is very, very important. And in my case, I'm trying to make vaccine in Japan, and what I found is what weakness we have in Japan in terms of patent. We don't have any patent in vaccine. This is a point now I'm struggling. But if I back to the COI, I would rather want to emphasize self-assessment. Or, of course, patent is part of this. Self-assessment is very important. Sometimes weakness makes chance if we make extensive self-analysis. In our case, for example, Nagoya University collaborate with Toyota Motor Company. Automated driving system we developed since 10 years ago. And this is a typical case. We are very close. One of self-assessment. And in case of Hiroshima University, they collaborated with Matsuda Motor Company. But their style is completely different. We are seeking the automated driving system. They seek fun to drive through the brain research. It's a different strategy. And both somehow at this time effective in terms of product. And Aomori Prefecture, I want to emphasize, is Hirosaki University. Aomori Prefecture has the shortest longevity in Japan. Shortest. This is their weakness. But Hirosaki University in Aomori Prefecture decided to examine why they have so short longevity, life longevity. And they started extensive research of citizens every year. And this movement attracted many companies all over Japan to the northern part of the Japan, very small university. Half of year they have snow. It's very difficult to operate research, but more than 30 companies, major companies in Japan, collaborate with Hirosaki University because they have the idea how to extend the longevity now. Weakness makes the innovation. I think so. What I want to emphasize is we need discussion, communication, assessment. This is very important for the innovation as a whole university or university company collaboration. If only one genuine guy invent something, we don't need collaboration. But in case of mission-oriented, we need discussion.
Great point. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Meton. Anything to add? We have only a few minutes, about 5. Roberto is looking at me. Wrap it up, wrap it up. Yes, we are. About 5 minutes, if you would like to add some final comments.
Just very quickly, I guess a really important conversation is the conversation with government, because I think we overestimate what we know about each other and how we work. We've just been through, the government have fallen in love with what they call industry transformation plans. And we saw the first one of those released about high-value manufacturing about 4 months ago was the draft for consultation. So we started going through it, looking for the word university, research centre, which we did not find in the course of that document, because there was this perception that industry sits over here, government sits over here, industry universities sit over here, and actually you know, it's industry's needs which matter here. And rather than what does an ecosystem look like with a 10-year roadmap for industry transformation. We hugely overestimate sometimes the educational process of each other in terms of what our objectives and aims needs to be.
Great point. Thank you.
Fortunately, in the last few years, we have more tools and support from our government, both for the local authorities here and the federal government. And sometimes this is important because when, especially you are a startup in a small market like here in Greece, you need support in order not to fail, because most of the startups rather fail than being succeed. And also, there is a point that you have to be supportive not only for you as an individual company, but for the whole ecosystem, because if there are more companies here at the technology park, there is also for us collaboration and new ideas, and the opportunity to become something bigger. And also, when we are going abroad, we have more opportunities to become successful. Because, for example, in one of the last exhibitions that we participated in Intersolar in Munich, we had a booth, we had a big present, we spent a lot of money for being there. But, for example, it's not easy for us to be competitive with the city of Cézanne. City of Cézanne booked a whole area of the Intersolar and provided free space and booths for the companies of the city of Cézanne. So it's good to have also some support, and the direction of the government here both, and also the European Union is very good on this field in order to be able to not only do basic research, but also applied research, and also to have more commercial products.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Tsipouras.
Yes, since we talk about frameworks, I would like also to mention that we actually have a program here in Greece, and it's called Framework, in order to do all these things, and it has a lot of tools and things like that. But mainly it focuses more on on the economic part of these things, and of how to give you some money and try to tell you how to spend them, regulate the input and output and things like that, but very, very less help in how to do things. Exactly, you don't, everybody assumes that you know everything. You know finance, you know research, you know intellectual property, you know laws, you know everything, because that's the main idea. You are the internship, you have to know everything. And although there are a lot of tools to help you in the funding part in order to move forward, in the research, nobody can tell you exactly things that they are more important. So either in the small university, because my university is of Western Macedonia is rather small, we don't have an office for moving projects out in the market. So it is pretty much the same thing. You, as a professor, as a researcher, you have to know everything, exactly how to do all these things, and that is the most difficult thing to overcome. This notion that because you are a faculty in a university in the electrical engineering department, you know everything about all the laws that they're related to everything that you're researching.
Well, thank you. We have here Compete GR. This is a great role for them to see what kind of framework do they set up so that small universities can benefit from some knowledge base on IP, on finances, on things that faculty can utilize and be able to be more successful. Please help me thank the wonderful panel we had here. I think we tried to cover a lot of areas. I really thought it was very useful what we heard from so many different people. Please help me thank our panel.